This is one of my 1994 Yokomo YZ10s. I have several of these, about 5 total. This one I got recently, and it was actually my cheapest one. I just had to take everything apart, clean it, put it back together. I put hex screws on it, titanium turnbuckles, and you know, it was a pretty simple job, nothing too crazy. But one thing I wanted to experiment with on this was the center lay shaft, because on the 94 YZ10, also the 93 works, and the Pavitas version, they all came with a one-way center pulley on the lay shaft here. And on a high traction surface, this is very helpful because it allows you to rotate the car more on turn-in, but on lower grip surfaces it makes it very hard to drive because you end up with 100% rear brake bias. So I wanted to see if I could find a way to make this one-way system kind of adjustable, so that depending on the traction you can have partially one-way or completely locked or fully one-way or whatever you want. So on the 870C, it's a little easier to do that because the one-way bearing is not on this pulley, it's actually on the housing here that the other pulley that drives the rear diff and the spur gear goes onto. So you can put some kind of a friction plate into that housing, assuming you don't have the slipper clutch setup going on, and you can use that to generate some friction and give you partial one-way. That's what I did on my 870C. I believe I touched on that in one of my 870 setup videos. But here, what I ended up doing was taking a clicker unit from an associated SC10 4x4 and mounting it onto the center pulley here. So let's see if I can get a slightly better view. So this particular center pulley is not stocked in the 94 YZ10. I believe it's part number ZD674H, something like that. It's a 15-tooth pulley, but it's for the YR4. And the difference is that for the YZ10, you have this big notch here on the end. And on this YR4 pulley, this side piece is a bit smaller. So it gives you a little bit more room to mount the clicker unit and the spring and everything. So that's very important. The other thing is, although I can't really show you because it's already mounted, but on the other side of this, on this side, there's an opening in this center pulley. And so that opening has a slot because on the YR4 you have the option with that lay shaft to mount like a drive pin into that slot and lock the one-way pulley onto the lay shaft. On the YZ10 lay shaft, you don't have that. So what I did is that little opening there is actually perfect to fit a 4x8mm flanged bearing. So you just throw it in there, mount it, and you're good to go. Now, as far as mounting the clicker goes, there's two pieces to the clicker. There's a small unit and the actual pulley, which was used on the SC10 4x4. So the smaller piece, it actually fits, it would be on this side, almost perfectly into this opening, because on this particular pulley, this bearing is recessed into the housing. So there's a little bit of an open gap here for you to fit this smaller piece into the center pulley. So you put that in there and you have to glue it in place. I had tried silicone glue at first, and it seemed to hold okay, but then once you started applying torque to it, it tears the glue apart. The only thing I found to work so far is super glue. I happen to use Gorilla Glue super glue, but for, you know, super glue like applications, but I suppose any super glue would suffice, and that seems to be holding just fine. So you mount that in there. That's the small clicker piece that mates into the front pulley for the SC10 4x4. Okay, so you mount that, and then on this pulley here, what you have to do is bore it out from the inside, because the hole that's originally in there, I think it supports maybe a 4 or 5mm bearing, and you have to bore that out to 8mm. So I just used a Dremel, and I just progressively opened up that opening there so I could fit a one-way pin roller bearing. Now this is the first one-way bearing I had tried using. I ordered it from Hong Kong. It's a relatively inexpensive unit. Can't remember the part number, but it's 4mm inner diameter by 8mm outer diameter by 6mm in length. Okay, so you get a 4x8x6 pin roller bearing. This one, when I tried using it, it did not work very well. Here, let me zoom out for a second here. It didn't work very well because there's a little bit of play. So you get one-way action going in one direction, and then when you try to go back in the other direction, it's supposed to lock. But there was a couple of millimeters worth of play before the bearing would actually lock. And when I had used this in this clicker setup, it would actually bind the clicker because there was a little bit of play in the other direction. And for whatever reason, it would just lock, it would bind this whole thing up and it wouldn't work properly. So I had to find another one-way needle type bearing that would work, that was a higher quality unit. I ended up finding one. I just kept looking for ones on eBay. If you go on eBay and you look for part number HF0406, it's a 4x8x6 needle bearing. It works perfectly for this application. And it's like, I don't know, $8 or so. And so you mount it in there, and the idea is that on the center pulley that drives the front diff, the one-way action goes this way, okay? And then on this pulley here, you want to mount the one-way so that the one-way action is in the other direction. That way, when you're under braking and the front wheels are spinning, okay, this center pulley here tries to move forward in its own one-way action, but this pulley here that has the one-way bearing in the other direction locks against the clicker and creates some resistance. Okay, so once you mount that clicker, or this whole clicker system is set up, you put this pulley in, and then you just mount the spring. This comes with the SC10 4x4 clicker set, and then that little clamp piece, it's like a little disc piece, I'm not exactly sure what it's called, that you originally use on the end of the lace shaft on the YZ10. You can just move that in or out to adjust the tension on the spring. Now, there is not a whole lot of space here, even with this smaller center pulley. So you don't have as much room for adjustability as I would like, but it is still somewhat adjustable. But as it is, if you set the spring all the way out to the end there, it's still reasonably tight, but it does actually work. So you can see this pulley here, which is kind of a dummy pulley now, the reason why I have that one-way bearing is so that it at least has some way of sliding in and out on the center lace shaft, while also being rotationally anchored in one direction but not the other. Okay, so if I wanted to, maybe a little hard to see with the focus on this camera, but I could take that little washer guy and push it in and create even more tension on the spring. If I wanted to completely lock it, I could just push it all the way in, and this is completely locked. So this is a way, if you wanted to just lock your center pulley and you don't have a one-way pulley, you do this, and you push the spring all the way in with that little washer, or you just remove the spring and push that little washer, excuse me, that washer in up against this dummy pulley, and it'll lock your front one-way unit. The SC10 4x4 clicker set is somewhere around $10 or $12, I think. It comes with the spring, so you're all set there, plus the one-way bearing. You're looking at maybe $20 or so, 25 max, to get this whole clicker unit set up here. And so for those of you that are running on lower grip surfaces and you want a little bit more front brake bias, you can have some adjustability in your one-way center unit on your Yokomo YZ10. The only thing is you got to find this center pulley for the YR4. They make a hard version, which is what I'm using here, and I think they also have a standard non-hard version for the YR4. I don't remember the part number, but that's probably your most expensive part. It can be anywhere from $30 to $40, depending on who's selling it on eBay. So in total, if you include this pulley here, it'll cost you maybe $60, $70 to get this whole thing set up. But once you have it, it's pretty cool. Pretty unique. I'm pretty sure it's the first of its kind to have a clicker unit on a Yokomo YZ10, and it is adjustable. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, and if you have any questions, of course, drop a note in the comment section, and thanks for watching.